When I came out of the womb, they assigned me the narrative that in my experience did have love in it, but it was primarily a toxic narrative of fear. God was up there and out there, had an anger management problem, and the only way to kind of calm himself down, because he was a white, straight man, God was to kill his son. And this is in a treatise in the 11th century by Anselm called the Substitutionary Atonement Theory. And the only way for you and me to keep ourselves out of eternal hell and damnation was to accept Jesus Christ as our personal Lord and Savior. And then, for some reason, we would go to heaven. Well, that's not true. That's what I was assigned. But I found out that that's not true. Because, now let's see if we can, I'm going to have to, we'll bring these people back. Okay, we're going to stop right there. Because one day in Jesup, Georgia, actually a little hamlet outside of Jesup, Odom, all of this is near Brunswick and Waycross and Savannah, I was playing alone in a pine grove. My little brother was not born until 7 years after I came into being, so I had an only child existence for quite a while. And, my friends, I was in this pine grove. They've now cut it down, so this is a facsimile. And I got this message from the inaudible voice. Now let's open a parenthesis and introduce you to a little more vocabulary. It's a great mystical theologian, Howard Thurman, who was Dr. King's spiritual director, who came to Spelman and gave a very famous baccalaureate address and said to the ladies who were graduating, "It behooves you to become familiar with the sound of the genuine." Genuine with a capital G. And in order to hear that sound of the genuine, you have to go beneath quiet, down to stillness. And there you will hear the sound of the genuine. Well, I was playing alone in this pine grove, and you can go down to stillness even when you're playing or when you're swimming or whatever you do, gardening, to do your mindfulness, contemplative meditation. And I heard the inaudible voice say to me, "Edwin, you are the most beloved, special creature I ever made." And at the very same time, these things can happen in mystical experiences. The inaudible voice said, "And so is everybody else." Every one of us is God's favorite. Every one of us is the most beloved and special creature God ever made. Now that's a love-based narrative. That's a love-based message. So that's who I was inside. And I had all this spiritual and cognitive and psychological and emotional dissonance to try to work out these conflicting, competing narratives in my life. So, as I said in my sermon this morning, that's what was going on as I've reflected on it now in my becoming an Episcopal priest. And we can talk about that story a lot some other time. So, my journey after ordination in this spot in 1983 has been about jettisoning a toxic narrative that's fear-based and reconstituting a narrative that is love-based. Now, here's Dr. Thurman, and here's this wonderful thing about the sound of the genuine, and I'll be happy to share these slides with anybody. I'm Ed at stlukesatlanta.org. I love criticism, as long as I can feel your love for me, you know, and give me feedback, or ask for this, and I'll send it to you. Now, I'll pass on through these things because I'm going to come back to them. But before I talk about this guy, I do want to introduce a category from Dr. Lord of mercy, when you get my age, this will happen to you. Walter Brueggemann, who taught here and for a long time, and he has one of the best little volumes on the Psalms I've ever read. And he says if you want to understand the Psalms, they really do break down into three categories, and they're all mixed up. And you have the Psalms of orientation, the Psalms of disorientation, and the Psalms of reorientation. Now, you know, Psalm of orientation, blessed is the man who, you know, doesn't sit in the seat of the scornful, da da da. Disorientation, my God, why have you forsaken me, Psalm 20. Psalms of reorientation is understanding that there's a lot of tough things in life, and nevertheless is one of the most important words in the Bible. Nevertheless, God is there. So 23, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. By the way, Richard Rohr says that the phrase do not fear occurs 365 times in the Bible. And in the gospel lesson this morning, we found that Herod was a person. And the whole deal is if we can somehow get hold of our fear, then we can do great things in life. So when I got to St. Mark's Dalton, about 1989, I think it was, I read this book, Life Signs by Henry Nouwen. And Henry has gone on to the great immensity now, but in this book, he helped me, he gave me my lens through which I look at life and the Bible and people and systems and everything. And he said that there's a force field of fear or anxiety, and then there's a force field of love. And you can feel the energy when you step into the force field of fear, or it takes you over, and vice versa. I had another mentor I'll be telling you about over the course of our time together, Rabbi Edwin Friedman, and he studied systems and anxiety, and his 19-year-old son, Ari, had a fender bender, and the lady he hit took him to court and sued for lots of money. And it was a fender bender. And this lady was given to living in the house of fear and anxiety. And so Rabbi Friedman tells the story that they were gathered, he and Ari and their attorney and the plaintiff and her attorney, around the judge's bench. And it got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And all of a sudden, Rabbi Friedman said he felt that he was now captive to the force field of anxiety, or what Henry Nouwen would call the house of fear. And he said, excuse me, y'all continue. And he simply removed himself from the judge's bench and went back until he could literally feel himself step outside the environment of fear and anxiety. And he said he came to himself again. That's a wonderful phrase that you find in the prodigal son. You know, the prodigal son came to himself after he was eating with the pigs. He'd gone through all of his money. He came to himself. Rabbi Friedman said he came to himself, came back up around the judge's bench, and about that time the judge said, well, Dr. Friedman, as the father of the defendant here, what do you think should happen? And Rabbi Friedman said, Life imprisonment, of course. Now, that story is in the chapter on candor in my book called 8 Habits of Love. Did you know I'd written a book? Yeah. And if you can practice the 8 Habits of Love, you can get out of your house of fear. Nouwen said, this is how we understand who Jesus was. When he was alone in the desert for the 40 days and 40 nights, he wrestled with not Satan, but fear incarnate. I don't believe in Satan with a pitchfork and all that stuff, but I do believe that any of us can be satanic when we give ourselves over to fear and fear-mongering. And he says, Nouwen says, that anybody who can make you afraid controls you. Don't have any freedom if you've given yourself over to somebody being able to pull your strings and make you scared. Jesus, he said, made a commitment during those 40 days and 40 nights to live in the house of love. And from then on, if anybody posed a question or a challenge from the house of fear, Jesus could sniff it out and he would never respond from the house of fear. He always responded from the house of love. And those who got it came along and were transformed and were healed and made whole. And those who didn't were party to the conspiracy of stringing him up. And that's a way to understand Jesus, and that's a way to understand who we are supposed to be. So, I have been, it's 5 till 11, we got to quit. No, 11:15, we got 5 more minutes. Okay. I've made so many mistakes today. But you don't have to be flawless to be perfect. I have been on this journey, and I'm here to tell you that I am a 1 John 4 Christian. Now, you can read this sometime at home, or you can ask me to send this to you. I'll be glad to send it to you. But it gets really, really clear about the nature of God, and that God is not fear, God is love. Pardon me for reading. In 1 John 4, there are 3 essential foundational claims. The first claim is that God is love. More than anything you can say about the ultimate power in the world, in life, and in history, the power many of us call God, more than anything you can say about that power, God is that power. God is that. That power is the power of love. That is to say that God is the energy of love. God is a verb, not a noun. God is movement, the movement of love. Now, we'll talk over the course of our relationship together here about what's going on with quantum physics impacting theology, and that we no longer are Newtonian based in the growing edge of Christianity, but we are more Einsteinian, who equated mass and energy, right? E equals mc squared. And so none of us are a bunch of jigsaw puzzle pieces that can be fit together. No, we are walking events, because all these atoms and protons and everything, I don't know what's in there, but they're acting all the time, and they're changing all the time because they're being impacted by somebody else. I mean, even these pews are energy. Everything is energy. So God is energy, and love is energy, and fear is energy. Now, I have a friend who said, Ed, I wish you'd just retire the word God and just use love all the time when you talk about God. Well, I got to bring some other people around, Paul. But that's where I am in my heart, that I could say love, and we're talking about this kind of love, not Bosch, as Dr. King said, and we're talking about God. The second thing is that complete love, whole-making love, perfect love, overcomes fear. Here we see that the opposite of love is not hate or anything else, although hate may be fear in disguise, but the opposite of love is fear, and that love is more powerful than fear. So no matter how scared I get in life, I know that if I can do my contemplative practice or other things, and I have I argue that there are 8 things you can do. Have I told you that I wrote a book? Yeah. So, stillness is one of these habits of love. Candor is another one. Truth is another one. Playfulness is another. And if you want the rest, you can. Did I tell you about my? Yeah. Okay. So, but love is always more powerful than fear. I don't care how strong the fearmonger is. When you get attached to love, when you awaken the presence of love inside you, which never goes away, when you access that love, you're in business. You're in business. Okay, the third thing of 1 John 4, and this has to do with how you treat other people. All other people. If you say you love God whom you have not seen, while abusing, hating, mistreating other people and creation whom you have seen, you're a liar. 1 John 4 just puts it out there. You are a liar. To love God is to love other people. Your neighbor is yourself. God love and neighbor love are inextricably intertwined. So we'll stop with this slide for today, and we'll reintegrate these slides into the next 2 Sundays. But Thomas Merton saved my life. And Thomas Merton preceded in my life St. Luke's. There were some things that happened that were of importance before St. Luke's. Not many, but some. I was a law student at Vanderbilt Law School, and I went there because I didn't know what I should do. I was a codependent, and codependents go around asking other people to tell you what you ought to do. So I'd say, oh, I don't know what to do. What should I do? Well, they said, well, you walk like a lawyer, talk like a lawyer, dress like a lawyer, go to law school. So I went to Vanderbilt Law School. And I'll come back and tell the longer story some other time, but I found Merton, started reading Merton, started digesting Merton. Merton talked about the false self versus the true self. And in the middle of a UCC exam, the Uniform Commercial Code is just one of the most stimulating things you've ever. If you have trouble sleeping, it's like Ambien in print. You just start reading that sucker. And but I had it down, and I was in the middle. I was in a law school final exam on the UCC, and I had a great teacher. He made us sign. In my day, when you took exams, you took them in a thing called a blue book, and you had to sign a pledge, an honor pledge on the front. And this one, he said, this is not that you're not going to copy your neighbor. This means that you are promising to me that you are not going to start writing until the 3rd of the 4 hours of this exam. The first 2 hours are going to be spent outlining. I don't want anything that's not outlined. So I've always been a good boy, so I outlined for 2 hours. Then I took a bathroom break at the beginning of the 3rd hour. Nashville, Tennessee, January 1971, lightly falling snow. And here comes the inaudible voice again, the sound of the genuine. Now I have inside my head this distinction between true self and false self. And this time the inaudible voice said, Ed, we'd changed my name from Edwin to Ed then now. First question, are you an attorney? Well, I knew that was meant, is your true self an attorney? I said no. Inaudible voice. If you're not an attorney, do you need a law degree? No. Inaudible voice. If you don't need a law degree, do you need to finish taking this exam? I said, no, I walked and never went back, except to explain myself 4 hours later when they found me. Having a beer to celebrate. No, I wasn't. Anyway, so I know the inaudible voice. I know the voice, the sound of the genuine. And Thomas Merton, my hero, said, to say that I am made in the image of love is to say that love is the reason for my existence. For God is love. Love is my true identity. Selflessness is my true self. Love is my true character. And love is my name. Now, there's nothing better to end a presentation on than that. Love is your name. Love is my name. I had a senior warden who, even before she heard about this, every time she'd see me, she'd say, "Hey, love." Oh, honey, that's a great way to be addressed, particularly by your senior warden. So there are two more chapters in this presentation series. One that we're going to do Sunday after next is on oneness, because oneness versus separateness has become as important as love over fear for me. We all are walking around with the wounds of separateness. It's a delusion, and I want to unpack that. And we're going to do that on Martin Luther King Sunday, and Horace is going to help me with that. Next week, we're going to talk about Christianity versus churchianity. And we're going to get back into unpacking my toxic narrative, which was churchianity, and my rethinking Christianity to be the way of Jesus rather than the way of scornful piety that divides us instead of makes us whole. I feel called to pray because I'm so grateful for this day and for these hours. So let us pray. If I can make it through it. Oh God, you are love. And you are always guiding us and leading us by a star, the star that will lead us to embodied love. None of us is in this room by accident. You always want to give us grace upon grace upon grace upon grace, and none of us ever deserves it, can earn it. Nothing we can do to make you love us more or love us less. You're just loving us and giving us more grace. So today has been a very great experience and data point of that theology. So thank you for our time together. Bless us as we move forward together. Enliven our awareness and our consciousness of being new people. Heal us where we are wounded. Energize us where we are sleepwalking. And always lead us to be our true selves, and always lead us to treat absolutely everybody